user's home directory, as well as the home directory itself. Files that are other places on the system besides the user's home directory that user owns are not deleted. You'll have to go and look for those manually, and we'll learn some tricks for that in a few lessons. Okay, so let's do a user delete with a -R option on Joe. Okay, now if we do an ls, you'll see the Joe directory is gone again. If we cat the etc password file, you'll see there's no entry at the bottom anymore for Joe. The last entry is Lisa again. And Joe is now removed from the system. Another command that's useful to know is the usermod command. We use usermod when we want to modify an existing user's account. If we do a man page on usermod, you'll see that the options are practically identical to those used in useradd. The only difference is that in usermod you can change the login name of the user with the -L option, but everything else is the same. We use the -C option for a comment and the -E option for an expiration date and so on. So let's quit out of the man page with a Q, and let's modify Lisa's account. Let's add a comment. So we're going to add Lisa's full name here to the user Lisa, and now if we look at the etc password file, you'll see that the comment field is filled in with Lisa's full name. Let me show you a little trick to use so that you can change a bunch of people's passwords at once. Let me add some users. I'm going to add the user Alice, and I'm going to add the user Bob, and then I'm going to add the user Candy. The only way right now we know how to change the user's passwords is to type password Alice, type the password, and then type it again to confirm it, and do the same for Bob and Candy and so on. Well, that would get old pretty fast if this list was 100 long instead of 3 long. So what I've done is I've created a file. I've called mine pwlist. In this file, it contains a username followed by a colon followed by the password for that user, and it has a line for each user that I want to change their password. Then what I can do is I can type chpasswd, change password, type a less than sign followed by the name of the file where I have those list of passwords. So I do that, and now all the user's passwords have been changed in one swoop. Here's the trick, or here's the danger, is that all these passwords are now stored in plain text in this file pwlist. So if I'm going to change a bunch of people's passwords using this technique, I'm going to create this file pwlist, list out all the usernames and passwords, I'm going to execute this command change password, and immediately when I'm done, I'm going to remove pwlist. Even though pwlist is in root's home directory and is not readable by anybody else, if somebody did get a glimpse of it, they would have the user's actual password. Right now, since I've removed pwlist, the only place that the user's password is stored is in the etc shadow file, and in there it's stored in an encrypted form, so that's pretty safe. So now let's talk about groups for a little bit. First thing you should know is that there's a file called etc group. In this file is a list. Every line is a separate group in the system. Let's look at this line, the Lisa group. The first field in each line is the name of the group, Lisa. The next field is the password. Again, X signifies the password's not stored in this file, it's stored somewhere else. And for groups, the file that it's stored in is an etc shadow. The next field is the group identification number, 501, and next would be a list of users that would be in the group. You can see nobody's in the Lisa group. In fact, nobody's in any of these groups. Let's go into Lisa's home directory and talk about something. If I do a long listing of all the files in this directory, this column lists the owner of all these files, and you can see all these files are owned by Lisa except the ... which is the directory above us, and that's owned by root. Same goes for group. Every file but the ... directory is owned by the group Lisa. But since nobody's in the group Lisa, this is sort of meaningless, right? Because nobody's going to be able to access these files based on group membership because nobody's in the group Lisa. So let's add a regular group, not one of these user private groups, to the system. The way that we do that is with the group add command. So I'm going to add this project X group to the system. Now group names must be 8 characters or less, and you can see project X just fits under that limit. However, on Red Hat, if I want to add a regular group to the system, instead of one of these user private groups, I have to use the -R option. On other systems, you can just say group add project X, but for those that use the user private groups like Red Hat and Mandrake, you should say group add -R project X. What that will tell the system is that I want this group to have a identification number under 500. The ones 500 and over are reserved for the user private groups. So to add the regular group, we use the -R option. And then if we look in the etc group file, you'll see that Project X has now been given a group ID of 11. Now let's add some users to this Project X group that we just created. One way that we can add users to a group is to use the Usermod command with the capital G option. Then we list all the groups that we want the user to be a part of, and then we list the username. So this says, make Bob a member of the Project X group. Now if we look at the etc group file here, you'll see that Bob is listed as a member of the Project X group. Let's add Candy to this group too. We'll do the same thing. We'll say Usermod, capital G, Project X, but this time we'll say Candy. And now we'll look at the etc group file again, and you'll see that both Bob and Candy are listed as members of the Project X group. Let's add a new group to the system. We'll say group add, don't forget the -R option so it's not a user private group, and we'll say Project Y as our new group name. Now say I want to add Bob to this Project Y group, but I want to also keep him in the Project X group. If I'm going to use the Usermod command to do this, I'll use the capital G option again, but like I said, you have to list all the groups that you want the user to be a part of. So I've got to list the Project X group, even though he's already in that group. This list is not a list of groups that I'm adding him to. This is a list of all the groups that I want this person in. So I forgot the Y here. But if I do that, now Bob will be a member of the Project X and Project Y groups. I do that, and then I look at the etc group file, and you'll see that Bob is a member of both the Project X and Project Y groups, and Candy's still just a member of the Project X group. Now what's a little bit tricky about using Usermod to add somebody to a group is you've got to know all the groups they're currently a part of, so that when you do the Usermod command, you don't accidentally remove them from the group by just omitting that group on the command line. So to know what group someone's in, you use the groups command and you say groups Bob. And this lists all the groups that Bob is in. So here's the username Bob. These are the groups that Bob is in. Bob's in the user private group Bob. He's in the group Project X, and he's also in the group Project Y. Now notice, he's in this group Bob, the user private group Bob, no matter what. I don't have to put that group on the command line when I add him to other groups. But I do have to put all these other groups. If I skip one of those groups, then he will be removed from that group, and that's probably not what we want. So you want to make sure you know all the groups that someone's in before you add them to a new group with the Usermod command. Let's talk about file permissions, which are also called modes, for a little while. There's separate permissions for 3 classes of owners on every file and directory in the entire system. The 3 classes of owners are the user owner, the actual owner of the file, the group, and others. This is everyone else on the system. If you do an ls-l, that'll show all the modes or permissions, and it's on the left-hand margin of the screen when you do an ls-l. Let's dissect exactly what this means, okay? The first character says whether it's a directory or not. If it's a D, that means it's a directory, and if it's a dash, that means it's not a directory. The next 3 characters here are the user's permissions for this file. So these 3 characters says the user has read, write, and execute permissions for this file. Now the next 3 characters are the group's permissions for this file. Okay, so the group has read and execute permissions for this file. And you can probably figure out that the last 3 characters are for the other class of owners. So this is for everyone on the system. So this says everyone on the system can read this file. So only the root and the owner can change modes. This is probably good, right? Because you don't want someone else to be able to come into your directory and make your files unreadable to you. Okay, so let's talk about how to change file permissions. We use the command change mode, and it has 2 formats. The first format is a symbolic format. In the symbolic format, we use the characters U, G, and O, which represents the user, group, and other classes. And we represent read, write, and execute with R, W, and X again. So if we want to add write permissions for the group class, we do this. We say change mode G plus W for this file name. This adds write permission for the group for this file. We can also do things like G plus RW. That would add read and write permissions for the file. We could do something like G minus W. That would take away write permissions for the file. So we use plus to add and minus to take away. We can also set permissions outright with the equal sign. When we use the equal sign, the permissions that we specify are set and all the other permissions are erased. So in this case, we're saying UG equals RW means the user and the group will both have read and write access to this file. There will be no access for others, and there will be no execute access for either user.